Welcome to the first of our Advent reflections. This year we're using some material from churches together in Britain and Ireland. Do go and have a look at their website if you'd like to know more about their work and what they're up to. We're focusing especially on the journey of the wise men, or the Magi as they're often called. Although we don't usually celebrate their arrival until well after Christmas, when we have the Feast of Epiphany, they of course would have started their journey long before Christmas. That first Christmas, probably months before, they would already have been making their way across Middle Eastern deserts as Mary was just beginning to feel the first kicks of the baby Jesus. So we're thinking about these wise men and what sort of hopeful expectation they travelled with as they came closer to finding the infant Jesus. Matthew's Gospel tells us that before the journey even began, the Magi looked up to the stars and out from their communities. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who's been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." 2,000 and more years ago, there was none of the light pollution that has dimmed the stars for us, nor any artificial light beyond flickering fires and oil lamps. No one had ever ventured into the sky. It was the home only of bats and birds and insects. Night came with its great bowl of stars and moonlight, and when darkness fell, earthbound people looked up and out. Looking up and out is fundamental to Christian life. When we imagine people engaged in prayer and reflection, we often think of the search for stillness and silence, closing our eyes and folding our hands, becoming inward-looking and focused as we dig down inside ourselves for God. Yet prayer and reflection can be the opposite as well. An opening of our eyes to become more aware, more connected with the universe around us, more aware of the needs of our fellow human beings in our own communities and neighbourhoods. And of course, more aware of our place in a stupendous creation. Ancient peoples looked up at the stars and sought to make sense of what they saw there. They called moving stars planetes, which meant wanderers, because they seemed to be moving around amongst the fixed stars. Now we know that these, the planetes, are the planets of the solar system. People used their eyes to distinguish the brighter from the dimmer stars and joined the dots of brightness to imagine them as images of people and animals and things, and named those patterns after the constellations, so the seemingly random arrangement of lights became accessible and nameable. And importantly, anything new could be noticed. If people saw something new, those people would ask, well, what's that doing there? And in the time of Jesus, new, unusual phenomena in the night sky were seen as signs from God. After all, God had created the heavens as well as the earth. So any new thing, a comet or a supernova, would be noticed and interpreted as something that God wanted his people to see and understand. Those who looked up and out would talk about these signs among themselves and say, we need to find out what's going on. What's God doing? Is he anointing a new king? Is there a war on the way? Is a new nation rising up? During Advent, we may not be looking up into the sky, but the question of what is God doing, that's still a vital one. What is God doing now in our world? Jesus said we should be watchful and ready for signs of God's kingdom. The Magi were good at that. They were always keeping their eyes open and keeping watch. They were ready. They'd heard prophecies probably from their own traditions and would have had their own expectations about what new stars meant. And when they saw this star, they decided to go on a journey, a pilgrimage, to get beyond mere guesswork and to see what God was doing for themselves. And Christian life today should be like this too. It shouldn't be about guesswork, but about keeping our eyes open for what God is doing, which takes a spiritual attentiveness. And when we see God at work, going to see in person and joining in. The next time there's a cloudless night, you might want to go outside and look at the stars. What can you see? Jesus would have looked up at the same moon and stars that you can see. What do you think he felt when he looked up into the sky? What do we see when we look up and out? As the Magi went on their journey, they were imagining something which hasn't yet come to pass. They were imagining a new future. Now, that ability to imagine a new future is also part of our lives as Christians. Without being able to imagine change, we're stuck where we are. But God calls us into a future, imagining and travelling towards what the world could be and look like. So just as the Magi make a spiritual journey to find this person born to be king, in Advent we're also on a journey. God continues to call us to set out to meet him in Jesus Christ. So how will we set out on our journey? In our churches, we often think only about the Magi arriving with their gifts. But the journey they had taken would have been risky and time-consuming and expensive and very uncertain. Christian traditions have tried to give us a sense of their vast undertaking. St. Matthew in his Gospel tells us that they came from the east, from the direction of the sunrise. And one tradition has it that they were scholars and that they came from as far away as India and Persia and Arabia. Imagine travelling to Jerusalem all the way from India, nearly 3,000 miles by camel. Our Christmas cards often give us a rather romanticised picture of the journey of the Magi. We see them happily swinging across a smooth, sandy vista lit by starlight and everything is calm, but actually their journey would have been dangerous. They would have been crossing unknown deserts, depending on local guides to find them water and food. They would have had to rely on traders on the desert routes or in little towns and villages where they would have been foreigners. The journey would have taken them months through uncertain weather and difficult terrain. So they must have been very determined. They must have been very driven. Anyone crossing such a distance would have been aware that it could cost them their lives. They might not return. Yet the star calls them onwards. As we journey through Advent towards the birth of Christ, can we share the determination and vision of the Magi, even when the journey is costly or difficult? Are we ready for an uncomfortable journey in order to meet God? Imagine your life as a spiritual journey. I wonder who have been your most important travelling companions? What resources have you had with you, and what things have you had to find for yourself along the way? What has guided you on the right path, and what do you think your future path might look like? What dangers or obstacles have you had to contend with, and where will you find yourself at the end of your journey? Where will this Advent take you? As you begin to look up and out, as you begin on your journey through Advent to find the Christ child, I pray for God's blessing on you and on your journeying.